for doing that.
Good morning or afternoon, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. My name is Lee Merriweather, and I'm a volunteer for AARP in Houston. AARP is the nation's largest nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to empowering people 50 and older to choose how they live as they age. AARP Houston is proud to sponsor Mindful Mondays, a caregiver series in partnership with Caregiver Wellness Retreat. With over 3.4 million caregivers in Texas, AARP is dedicated to providing resources and information to those caring for a loved one or a friend. Prepare to Care resource guides are available to download, and they are designed to help develop and implement a caregiving plan. The guides include information on how to have vital conversations, tips for organizing essential documents, a roundup of federal and national resources, information on caring for yourself, checklists, medication charts, and contact lists. Visit aarp.org/caregiving to download your guide. You can also visit aarp.org Houston for more virtual events and resources in your community. We can be found on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter at AARP Texas. I will put the links and information in the chat. And again, thank you for joining us today.
All right. Thank you so much, Lee. I appreciate you. And I always appreciate you being here. And Lee acts as our liaison to continuously let folks in, and she'll be putting the information in the chat box as well. So we have asked, if you're still just arriving, that you would put maybe where you're zooming in from and one good thing. I always, I think sometimes the habit of gratitude that isn't forced is a sort of it's a proven science that it gives us that little hit of serotonin, which is that hormone which releases those good feelings. And it's always a good reminder because there's always at least one good thing, right? So as Lee mentioned, I'm Melissa. And if you've been following along or whether you're new this week, we are so glad you're here. And I know there are many who watch us on recording. And so you can find those on our our YouTube page at Caregiver Wellness Retreat. So all the previous weeks are there as well as some other recordings that we have as well. So mindfulness has been, it's really our go-to topic, and we'll interweave this really important topic today about connecting with others with some mindfulness exercises. So if you've been with us before, you're probably familiar with the format that we'll have some discussion, we'll do some experiential, we'll move back and kind of go back and forth between those things. I am recording this, so I'm actually pinned. And so even if you unmute yourself, you shouldn't be on the recording, but know that might, Zoom has a mind of its own often, so it might be a possibility. And you can always communicate via the chat box as well, but I'm happy to entertain questions throughout our program as well. So let's just start today with a really very, very simple exercise. And so if you can, go ahead and you'll put both feet onto the ground. And so I know I say this each time, but I do make some assumptions in terms of accessibility and what your body is able to do. And I'm mindful that we don't all have the same abilities or the same access to our bodies as well. And so as long as you're attuning to what your body needs and your abilities today, I'll make the assumption that you'll take the best care possible of yourself. And so that is really important. So however you are, whether you're seated, you can always choose to stand or even move around as we talk. I know we often are constantly focused or trained toward a device. And so being able to be flexible and doing what's best for your body's needs throughout this hour is really, really important as well. So however you are, feet on the floor or standing, so that you're connected to something on the earth, we'll take a breath in together. So you'll just simply breathe in through the nose. So breathing in, and allow the exhale to come out of the mouth in the form of a sigh. And breathe in again through the nose. So inhaling and exhale, just let that sigh happen. Good. And do that one more time. And then this time, pay attention to anything happening in the upper body as you sigh. And if you are able, you can take the eyes slightly off the screen, or you can close them, whichever feels better for you. And so just noticing after those sighs, maybe what feels softer in the body, what you feel more aware of. Maybe you're more aware of your breath now. So eyes can be open or closed, but just slightly off the screen. And let's take one more breath and a sigh. So breathing in and just a gentle sigh. Good. And when you're ready, you can open the eyes. You'll take another inhale and we'll lift the shoulders up. Now imagine you have these bones, wingy bones in your back called scapula. Imagine drawing the scapula together. So you're drawing the shoulder blades together in the back, and then lower them down and then relax. So do that again. So it's like a shoulder roll, but it's a little more intricate. So inhaling, lift the shoulders. Exhale, draw the shoulder blades together. Keep exhaling as you lower the shoulders down. Do that one more time. So it's almost like flossing between the shoulder blades. You lift the shoulders to the ears. You're drawing the shoulder blades together closer to the spine, allowing them to go down like an elevator, and then relax. Good. And then just notice if there's any new awareness around the shoulders and especially into the back. And then we'll do one more really simple movement exercise. So draw the chin just softly in toward the chest. And then imagine that your chin had a pencil on the end and that you had to sort of draw a smile. So you're going to draw the chin toward one shoulder, and then you'll simply draw the chin toward the other shoulder. So the chin is down and you're just going side to side as slow as you can. So the neck itself is in flexion, and then you're moving it into rotation by moving it side to side. Then bring it back to the center and then lift the chin and the eyes, and then bring one ear to the shoulder. And now pause here, keep the ear toward the shoulder and move your eyes around. So you're going to look up, circle, and look all around. Notice if your ear doesn't go closer to your shoulder just by moving your eyes. It usually does. And then come back up to the center. Pause for a second. So before you go to the other side, just notice what feels different. And then take your time, let that opposite side just melt, ear towards shoulder. And then move your eyes around. So you're going to look up, around. So really kind of stretching the eyes. We don't normally, right? We move our neck to move and look. We don't usually just move the eyes. And then notice if your ear is a little closer to the shoulder, and then come back up to the center and blink the eyes just a little bit. Any other movements that just kind of feel good? And take a moment to notice what feels more alive in your body right now. And you can even type that into the chat box. For me, my eyes feel more alert, a little less tired than they were a minute ago, just by doing that little extra eye movement. I also feel a little bit of a tingly in the back of my neck, which feels really good after looking at my computer all morning. So take just a moment to notice what is just a little bit different. When we can notice that change or have a measurement of change, then we're more likely to repeat these kinds of practices. So maybe you might have a pen that's handy and a piece of paper as we go throughout class, and maybe just even jotting a single word, or if there was something that really resonates with you today, one little thing that you could write down will help you remember right? To practice it later today or even later on in the week. So yeah, so some of us, our shoulders feel more relaxed, and it helped you to feel more grounded. So I'm glad to hear that. We're going to share my screen today. So moving toward my presentation. This is such a good question to ask. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with Priya Parker. I tend to mention her here and there in my sessions. She has a beautiful book called The Art of Gathering. And she asked this question: what do we want to be different because of how we spent this time together? You wouldn't have shown up today if there wasn't an intention behind it. And so for this theme that we have of connecting with other people, with creating a sense of meaning behind our connection, what do we want to be different because of how we've spent this time together? So you might jot down a word of maybe what your intention is for today. Maybe it's just to learn a couple of mindfulness tools. Maybe it's to have that break in your day where you can really just spend time for yourself in this idea of self-care or wellness. Maybe you're struggling with some connection in your life. So whatever your intention is, you can either put it in the chat or you can jot it down yourself. A couple of things that I find really helpful when we are creating this intention of how we gather together is to be really clear on your own embodiment of your presence. So part of mindfulness is, right, being within the present moment in this single like frame of time. So present moment awareness without judgment, always hard to do. But how do we really fully embody this sense of presence? And so for me, it might be turning off the phone, making sure that I have distractions at a minimum, maybe even just setting it across the room so I'm not tempted to be multitasking, closing my email applications. If you've chosen to be present in this hour, how can you really just be here and now? So connection, the power of connection. Our connection to others is only as powerful and deep as our connection to ourselves. I'm going to repeat that again. Our connection to others is only as powerful and deep as our connection to ourselves. Which is why we started with a little bit of that movement. Sometimes movement is that stimulant, which is part of a mindfulness practice, that we need to come back into the body and into the moment. Oftentimes when we sit for a long period of time, there's a sense of dullness to the body, maybe even a lack of awareness. We tend to ignore hunger cues or even thirst cues. We might even hold off going to the bathroom if we're busy doing something. But when we're really attuned to what our body needs, when we're connected to our own needs, is when we're able to actually connect more fully and with more presence to others. And so today our focus is simply on this entire power and the beauty of this connection. And I love this cartoon. The one tree says to another, you want to hang out again tomorrow? Yeah, sounds good. I think it's easier to make friends when you're a tree. And so I think sometimes, especially when we've been in this isolation and we're beginning to emerge from isolation, and what does that look like? We've essentially connected to those and the things that are closest to us, which is why I feel like Zoom is such a gift, because we've been able to stay home in our sort of insulated environments and still be able to resonate with one another. But how do we kind of branch out from there? Again, pun intended. How do we move beyond this isolated connection and begin to make those steps back into being more present with others? And it actually does take some practice. There are some components of connection: open-mindedness, curiosity, empathy, and flexibility. These are the main components that we're going to go over today. And so I'm curious, as you're looking at this list, if there is one that really pops out at you that you are really good at, like you're like, yeah, I got this. Like you might be a really empathetic person. Maybe you're a very adaptable or flexible person. Maybe you're super curious about others. You tend to ask a lot of questions. You tend to be an interviewer type personality. And open-mindedness. So open-mindedness is how we relate to others without falling into our bias, without holding tightly to our ideas. So how open-minded are you on a scale of 1 to 10? So you could unmute if you like, or you can add it to the chat box if you'd like to do that as well. 8. That's pretty high. That's excellent. Anyone else want to share? Another 8. I love it. 7.
I just want to say, I think I'm open-minded in theory at about an 8, and in practice, I struggle at maybe a 5 or 6.
Yeah. I so appreciate your transparency, because that is so similar to my answer. I can relate to you 100%. I think in my head, I'm really good at all of those things, all of those components of connection. And kind of when it comes down to it, how do I embody it and how do I practice it? And it isn't always as sharp as I'd like it to be. And so one of the things that we talk about in mindfulness of how do we actually implement these practices? Well, we do the practices when things are good. So we started our session together today by talking about one good thing that's going on. And when we tap back into times and when we are feeling calm and present, that's actually when we practice these mindfulness exercises. That's when we practice our open-mindedness. So that when things get really hard, when things get stormy, when things hit the fan, we actually can be able to implement that open-mindedness when we need to. And that's the hard part. That's the challenge, right? So open-mindedness is welcoming new ideas, arguments, and information that we don't typically align to. Yeah. We're going to pause and do another simple mindfulness exercise. And it's one of the simplest that there are, and it's simply breathing, and it's breathing with counting. And the reason I really love this particular exercise is because it uses 2 different parts of the brain, and it uses counting with following and noticing. So using what we call felt sense. So paying attention to the quality of the breath, the timing of the breath, maybe the volume of the breath. So by paying attention to these 2 different aspects, it really is almost a preventative to really getting chatty, to following those extra trains of thoughts, to being really judgmental about things. So by really allowing us to focus, it brings things a bit more narrow for us and allows us to be broader and open-minded. I love it. So we'll go ahead and you can take your eyes just slightly off the screen, or you can lower your gaze and close the eyes, either way. I always appreciate either noticing what I'm sitting on or taking both of my feet onto the ground. And it just gives me a greater sense of feeling my body against the earth. So there is this idea of feeling the body within. So again, either eyes off the screen or closed. And you might, without changing, just notice the pattern of the breath right off the bat. Is it quick? Is it slow? Is it cool? Is it warm? Is it long, short? Is it rigid? Is it smooth? Is it isolated in one part? Or can you feel it reverberating in the body? Just noticing. And then when you're ready, we'll simply count 10 breaths together. So an in breath. And as you exhale, you can say the word 1. No need to change the tempo. In breath and 2. In. Exhale 3. In. Exhale 4. And you'll keep going 5 more rounds on your own, simply repeating in and then the number. Starting to notice again, felt sense. If there's any change, any softening. If you've lost count, it's okay. You can just repeat in and out. If you're still going, keep going. If you've finished, you can begin to blink the eyes open and reintegrate toward the room. I might suggest, rather than bringing the eyes right back to the computer, that you take a wide angle view of the room. So just kind of noticing your surroundings. So still feeling what you feel, noticing what the body feels like now, but taking in the room. So you might notice colors, shapes. Maybe your eye picks up something that is a treasured object, or even nature out the window. And then tether it back to what you notice in your body. From that exercise, the sense of calm, sense of ease, or any change physiologically. And when you're ready, you can bring your eyes back to the screen. So we did a couple of things with that exercise again. We toggled between counting and just noticing felt sense, which keeps the thinking mind from kind of spiraling and circling. So if you're one of those that can really be in your head a lot, it's a beautiful exercise to pull you out of that and into the body. The second part of that exercise was reintegration. So moving back out into the world, but still feeling what you feel and notice in your body. And it's so fantastic to be able to practice that as a skill for that open-mindedness. So we're constantly checking in. What is my felt sense? Do I notice that I'm getting a rise out of this conversation, out of my interaction with this individual? Can I still be with the sensation in my body and be present with this person, this group, or this situation? So when we can pull or tease those two apart, it helps us to detach from the judgment, from being stringent in our thoughts, from being really rigid, our lack of flexibility. So it allows us to remain in that space of open-mindedness. So the really simple way that I practice that, we did an exercise, I think last week or the week before, I can't remember, where it's take 5, where you just take 5 breaths and notice your breathing pattern in 5 breaths. And anytime you pause to take a breath, whether it was that exercise or even the first one we did where we just did a big sigh, immediately begin to notice your reintegration to your surroundings. So it's being able to be in the body, feeling what you feel, that emotion that came up, whether it was strong, doesn't matter. No emotions are wrong. It's how we implement it. So I can feel anger, but am I going to react on the anger? Or am I just going to notice that anger is present? And then I choose how I act. And that's how we develop that muscle, that open-mindedness. I'm going to move back to my screen. Let's see. Feel free to, you can add to the chat box as well. Ooh, curiosity. I was recently, I celebrated my 50th birthday. We went to Tucson. I'd never been there before. And I was staying at this really lovely place, and the woman, came up to me, the caretaker, and she's like, "Come here." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And she said, "Look up in the tree." And there was this most magnificent owl. It was pretty much looking at me just like this and looked down. And I thought, wow, how amazing is nature? How amazing is this? And I started to think about really this idea of curiosity. Why is it's the middle of the day? Why is it even giving me a moment to look at me? What is it thinking? What is it waiting for? Curiosity is marked by a desire to just investigate, to learn. It's being inquisitive of others and of their concern. I had a student ask me today, I do some career counseling with a university, and she said, "Oh, they had asked me to network, and I don't want to network. I don't like networking." And I said, "Well, what is it about people that you enjoy?" And so she told me some things, and I said, "Well, I wonder if you could just be really curious about getting to know people rather than thinking of it as networking or something that you have to do." So what is one question you could ask someone that that it would spark a conversation? So a suggestion might be, what are you most excited about right now? What is coming up for you that you're looking forward to? What is the one thing about caregiving, for example, that keeps you getting up in the morning? So if we can be really curious about one another and spark some joy along that sense of curiosity, it carries the conversation without us having to ask a closed-ended question. It really opens up possibilities for us. I'm going to move into another experiential. So if there's anything that you want to add, you can always unmute or add it to the chat box. But we'll move into, we're heavy on the meditation today. So we're going to move into, this is one of my favorite meditations, and this actually comes from Joan Halifax. She's actually a Roshi here where I am in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And I love this meditation. So I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. Again, find 2 feet on the ground if you can, and taking the eyes slightly off the screen or just taking a low gaze to them as well. So checking in, noticing what you notice in the body. If you're noticing that you've been sitting a lot and you prefer to stand, you can do that. You can also kind of add a little wiggle or movement to the body as it needs. Remember, anytime we do these practices, they're not a competition in stillness. They're actually an exercise to increase awareness of what's happening in the landscape inside the body. So this meditation is about us having a sense of equanimity. And equanimity, one of my favorite definitions, you've probably heard me say, is being okay with what's happening. Being okay with what's happening. And it's having that broad perspective and clear mind, so that open-mindedness. And then it's acting on a way that is principled, that exhibits the values of who we are. So notice the sensation of the body sitting or standing or however you are. Allow yourself to relax into it. So it's not rigid, but you can feel maybe the anchor of the spine. So as you shift your attention to the spine, no need to evaluate it or judge it. You just notice it. And we use the back, this idea of having a strong back, as a metaphor for being able to hold ourselves in the face of difficulty. Strong back. Strong back is what it sort of gets us through day to day, emotion to emotion, task to task. Our ability to hold ourselves in that face of difficulty. So breathing, imagining that you're energizing your strong back. And breathing out any tension. Breathing in that strength. And breathing out that residual of that tension. You can say to yourself silently, strong back. It's this equanimity. And when you're ready, shift your attention to the front of your chest. You can even put your hand there if you like. Maybe you can sense the openness. This idea of a tenderness. Spaciousness around the heart. Soft heart. And can you rest in the sense of warmth that you feel there? So there's care that you can extend to yourself as you put your hand on your heart. This sense of tenderness that I see you, I feel you. And then you can lower the hand if you've got it on the heart and almost with the hand open, resting it down. It's this tenderness toward others, this compassion that you have for the world, for your surroundings, for your immediate community as well. This sense of compassion. So toggling between the two, this strong back, this sense of equanimity, being okay with what is, what you have to shoulder, any difficulties, soft heart. The compassion we extend toward ourselves and toward the world. Take a few breaths just to seal in this practice. Strong back, soft heart. When you're ready, you can open your eyes. loosely, there's a quote from Bruce Lee that says basically that we don't rise to our expectations, but we fall to the level of our training. And so anything that resonates with you today, think of it as that sort of practice, that training. It's when things are going well that we can do this training, and that we can have that strong back. And then in moments where we need to rejuvenate toward that soft heart, we can be attuned to it. I'll share my screen again. Oh, I think I may have to do one more thing before I share my screen. Hang on just a second. All right, there we go. So I'm hoping, there we go. And many of you have probably seen this video, and it is so worth our time. So I'm going to play it for you. And whether you've seen it once or like me a dozen times, I hope that there is something new that resonates with you. This is, of course, from my favorite, Brené Brown, who I always tend to mention. And she talks about empathy and connection. And do let me know, anyone in the chat who can see this.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Whew. I'm gonna hit pause there. I don't know how many of you have seen that one before. You can add to the chat or add to the comments. But wow, her definition of empathy: feeling with people. Feeling with people. And I think it probably wasn't until Brené Brown's work revealing the difference between sympathy and empathy that it really made a difference for me. And then what really made a big difference was when I understood those responses, when people actually said those things to me. And I'm not sure how many of you can relate. And you're thinking in your head, I can't believe they just said that. Don't they know what the grief is like? And you know what? A lot of people don't. They don't know what you're going through. They don't know what grief is like. And they probably will never know your own personal experience. So for us to hit that pause, have that open mind, that lack of judgment, that sense of equanimity is tough. But when we can actually feel with them, when they're reflecting back to us from their experience, we have the potential and the catalyst for change and how we connect with them. Because oftentimes, right, it's either our own lack of awareness and also their lack of awareness. And so just as we want to be compassionate, soft heart, right, gentle with ourselves, we're gentle with them. There's this trick that I use sometimes. And when I'm in conversation, I'm not going to say names. It might be a relative. and we have a completely different view on something. I'm talking polar. I will use this little trick, and I will imagine that I am an astronaut and I am coming upon an alien life form. And I think, that little alien life form has a very different view than I do. I wonder why they're thinking this way, or I wonder what it is that has created this different or really opposing planet view. And where can we somehow be able to be with each other, even though we have completely different planets? And so if I kind of put a little humor to it, if I can take a little out of that tightly held belief that I have, and imagine how I can have that sort of soft heart. In other words, how can I just be really curious about why they're feeling this way, why they think this way, why there's such a stringent view. And then I don't have to take myself quite so seriously. There's another aspect, and I talk about it when I do a talk on boundaries. I also think about what's my bottom line, right? So there'll be a bottom line for me where, if that individual has, done something that's violated my bottom line. So ethically, along those lines, it's something that really is not okay. And that's where I can clearly communicate what my boundary is and my bottom line as gracefully as I can. And I thank them for continuing to teach me about my own boundaries. And then I have a choice. Family is difficult, whether I continue to communicate, but I also continue to communicate what my bottom line is, that piece of integrity or that value that I will not violate. And then above that, right, above that piece, if it's something that's not violating that bottom line, that's where I can soften and I can have that alien view and I can be like, okay, we can have this difference. And then what do we have in common? What can we focus on that brings us together as opposed to taking us apart? But if we choose to only associate with those that are just like us, then neither one of us changes, right? Neither one of us has the option to adapt and become more flexible. So I'll carry on. I know we could have a huge philosophical conversation on this one. And I appreciate you listening. And I so love, and I'll send you in our links, that Brene Brown video. I think it's incredibly powerful and worth hearing multiple times. My mouse is very sensitive. So when I think about self-empathy, there's a couple of questions that I'll ask myself. What am I seeing or hearing that's stimulating me or getting a rise out of me or affecting me? What am I thinking? So if I'm really in my head, what is that thinking mind all about? Like, I might jot down what I'm noticing. Am I ruminating on something? How can I be more empathetic toward that thought? What am I feeling in my body? So not ignoring those particular emotions that come up. Have tea with it, explore it, get really curious about the feeling. And then what am I needing? What am I needing? And I think that's a really difficult one for us, whatever phase you are in life, but particularly if you're a caregiver, tapping into your needs and being empathetic toward those needs, because we tend to put them at the bottom of the barrel. And what am I requesting to address in those needs? So I know this is pretty elementary, and I'm going to send a link to this in our follow-up today. But this is a list of these universal needs, and I think it's really worth time and value to think about them. When you think about also what your quote bottom lines are, what the things are that you value most, your needs should be really on there. They should be on that list. So what is it that you value? Your faith, your hope, peace, meaning, maybe a sense of purpose in what you do. Maybe there's exception, compassionate, kindness. Maybe one of your really strong values is that sense of security, just emotional stability. When you can understand, and I'll circle back to what we opened up with in the very beginning in the first slide about the components of connection, how we cannot connect with others unless we connect with ourselves. It comes down to this list, being able to identify what our needs are, and then we can identify with others and their needs. So maybe tease out if there's one, it might require glasses. I know the writing isn't as big as I would like it to be, so forgive me, but I will send the link. But maybe pick out one or two of these that really stands out. If there's one that stands out, you could always add it to the chat box as well. Community is a big one for me. Peace is another big one. It's really a huge value of mine. Purpose. So when we're empathetically listening to others and we're shifting that, what are they seeing and hearing that's stimulating them? What are they feeling? Can we ask them? Can we be curious about what they're experiencing in this moment? And what do they need? And what are they requesting to address with those needs? So it's really listening underneath the conversation, because generally there's a request in there. Empathetic listening is a dance. It's not about one always winning, the other one losing, right? Or vice versa, or needing to be right. There's always this sort of factoring in of, is the other one's needs getting met? Am I getting my needs met? And how do we dial up and dial down to adjust so that we both feel equally heard and understood? Some good check-in questions, and I'll have this for you in our follow-up too to think about, and we're just going to kind of mindfully reflect on these for a moment. As you have a conversation, so think about reflecting on a recent conversation you had, and I'll ask you to choose one that's not really triggering for you. So maybe it's just a conversation you're curious about. Maybe it was a mild disagreement. Think about, was I centered or relaxed, or stressed, scared, or angry? Reflecting on the conversation, was I curious about connecting with that person, or did I need to be right? Yikes, it's a big one for me. in that conversation, did I know I had all the answers? Or do I realize that maybe I didn't have all the answers? Or am I only wanting to get my way? And was I open to the outcome that addressed the needs of what was happening? So did I look underneath the conversation, or was I kind of closed to those outcomes? Maybe take a moment to just reflect a little bit more and take a few breaths as you do it. So just noticing. Maybe there's one that really stands out for you that could be applied next time, the next conversation that I have. Can I be more curious about connecting or open-minded? Can I be more relaxed in my body and in my mind? Whew, I love Brené Brown, you know that. All right, I'm not here to get it. I'm here to get it right, not to be right. I am here to get it right, but not to be right. Yeah, for as long as it takes. And I think that's that dose of humility that we have, right? One of the things that really helps me is I imagine a conversation and my body and my nervous system almost like a doorbell. So that doorbell can be essentially, do you hear me? Like, what is my attention at that moment? Am I available for the conversation? Am I going to let the person in, or do we need to postpone the conversation? And then what is happening in my body? Is there a sense of safety in the conversation? How responsive am I to the connection that I'm trying to establish? Will you help or hurt me? So you're constantly doing this stance of resonance and attuning to one another as you speak in conversation. The last one is flexibility. And flexibility is to be able to think and behave according to the situation. It's how adaptable are we, right? So it's letting go of that idea of really, this is my outcome at all cost, or can I pull back? I don't even remember when I heard this, but it was Oprah, and it was many, many years ago. And I remember thinking, someone had asked her how she's achieved so much. And she said, well, I set a goal, I do this, I put it out in the world, but I release the outcome. So it's not about, people have accused her of being a perfectionist. She said, no, I work for greatness. I put it out, and then I see what is. And when you're open to the what is often a lot better than whatever the outcome that you decided to formulate in your mind. I wish I had a link for you on that talk. I don't know, but it's something that has stuck with me for many years. How married am I to my outcome? Or instead, can I enjoy the process of connecting with someone else, of the process of caregiving, or the process of just living with the intention, right? My intention of being my best or doing my best, or whatever my bottom lines are, my integrity, but be okay with what is. I think of Eleanor and her art, and she's, creating a piece for someone and putting it together, and then it's in the world for someone to enjoy, right? So it's not our responsibility to decide how people will enjoy what we produce. It's our responsibility to find the joy in the process of it. So we're going to close with a couple of breaths together, and then I'll close our recording, and then I'll stay for a few minutes if anyone wants to chat or offer any feedback. One of my favorite and the simplest mindfulness exercise is just simply pause. Simply the pause. So you can take your eyes just slightly away from the screen or close the eyes, whatever feels most natural for you or simplest. And I'll just take my hands and I'll either press them into my lap or I'll press them together, holding them. But it's as if I'm hitting the pause button. And when I do that, I'll just simply exhale. A really soft, gentle breath, breathing normally. And I feel the weight of my hands either against my lap or against my body. And it's like I'm hitting or pressing the pause button. What can soften? What can unravel? What can be released when you hit the pause button? And when you're ready, you can blink the eyes open. So I want to thank you all for joining us today. And I'll go back to that idea of how do we want to be different because of how we spent our time together today. So if there's one thing that resonated with you, you can add that to the chat box. Or as I turn our recording off, you can unmute yourself and share if you like.